I'm Eric Poole, editor of Guns and Ammo magazine, here with Christopher Laack of Federal Premium Ammunition, and Patrick Sweeney, author extraordinaire and sir, one of the longest people I've ever worked with. You are an expert on this subject. Today we're talking about the 32s, specifically the 32 H&R Magnum and the 327 Federal. You're going to find an article that Patrick Sweeney wrote for Guns and Ammo's September issue. You're going to want to check it out. It's called More Than Retro, and it features both of these cartridges going head to head. Hey, let's go ahead and give a spoiler, Patrick. If you're going to carry one revolver with one of those cartridges, which is it going to be chambered in?
I refuse to answer the question on the grounds that I would carry both of them.
Depends on where you're carrying it and what for, right?
Yeah, I mean, my main one would be the Ruger in 327, and the backup would be the Smith in 32.
Excellent. Well, hey, we're going to talk a little bit about these. You put them head to head in here and made a lot of interesting comments on my screen to the right. You'll see me looking at your article here for reference because you made an interesting quote in here. You said early on in the article, Federal has taken two paths to that end, and the first involves improving the performance of the older two, the 32 H&R. Yes, it's called the H&R Magnum in quotes, but I just can't bring myself to use the word Magnum. H&R, so much potential on the table. Can you expand on that, Patrick?
The cartridge was developed back in the early 80s for Harrington and Richardson to put into their top break revolvers. As a result, they had to keep it as short as it is, and they had to keep the maximum average pressure as low as it is. If they had started with, just to pick on somebody, a K-frame size revolver, they could have gone longer and they could have added pressure. And, if it had been even just a little bit longer than it is now, and up at, what, 21,000 is the MAP on this, they had gone 27, 28. They could have really been hard on the heels of the 38 Special, and they would have really put a damper on development of the 9mm back then, because in 1984, there were still a whole lot of people that were not too happy about going to a 9mm. So if they could have put a 32 in the H&R Magnum that performed like a 9mm, they'd have been real happy. And then later on, make the real Magnum of the 327 longer and a higher pressure, as happened with the 38 and the 357, then we'd be really styling.
Well, let's go back into time machine.
Okay.
Talk a little bit about that 32 H&R, as you call it. I'm not going to call it a Magnum here. Chris, can you tell us a little bit about what they were working with and how we got to there, and why hasn't there been anything until the 327 Magnum?
Yeah, it's funny when I talk about the 312s, right, 312 diameters. We in development, it's funny how at Federal we kind of keep coming back around to that diameter bullet for a defensive bullet. Back in the day when you had your 32 Smith and Wesson, 32 Smith and Wesson Long, things like that, more traditional cartridges, right? That they then you are looking at a Magnum when you look at 32 H&R Magnum in comparison to that, right? But that's it's going back a long ways. It is, there's more to it than that, right? Because you're also going from black powder to smokeless powder and all the other things that come with that kind of a modern cartridge. But
It just occurred to me, an interesting callback in time is the first auto-loading pistols were in what? 30 and 32. The 30 Luger, the Borchardt, the 37.65 Mauser, they were all 30 to 32 caliber, which was deemed really useful back then. I guess we're just coming back to the late 19th century.
yeah,
Let's hope some of the Edwardian fashions don't come back too.
Oh yeah. Well, how does the cartridges back in that time would have been full metal jacket, often round nose. How does
or just lead, yeah,
bullet profiles or lead,
yeah,
correct?
yeah.
How does modern bullet profiles affect the performance and potential that the 32 would have had, given modern technology?
Yeah, I mean, just bullet design in general has changed, and as well as what your objectives are, right? So understanding terminal ballistics and what your limits are in physics and physiology with handgun projectiles, just understanding that and where it made sense to make focus. So back then you just, I mean, you're poking holes, right? You're poking holes, and that's it. So you just needed something with a sufficient energy to poke a hole deep enough through various things to get there to be meaningful. So it smaller diameter moving faster pokes better holes. Bigger diameter pokes bigger holes. Yeah. So, um, but there was also the fact that the reason they were carrying handguns was convenience and ability to hide it and do things like that. So then just going with the smaller diameter, you could get if you did have a revolver, you could get more rounds in and make the gun smaller, easier to conceal. So I mean there was a drive kind of for that at the time, that eventually you started to see the bigger calibers because of the fact that you were just poking holes, right? Like if we knew in 100 years ago, we know today about hollow points, there you wouldn't need a 45 caliber projectile for personal defense or carry, right? So it now granted it is more terminally effective, but less so than people believe it is, right? So the it's funny, we go and shoot into calibrated gel blocks at wound ballistic workshops, and we'll shoot 940 45 all together and ask people to pick out which wound channel is which, and they have a hard time doing it because visually there's not that much difference. There is incremental gains, but they're small incremental gains. So kind of that perfect sweet spot in, we can get a personal defense bullet to maximize what it can do in a small concealable gun. The perfect sweet spot that we found keeps coming back to that 32, right? We keep coming back there, and we discovered that with 30 super carry too in the auto pistol, and that we didn't set out to make a 30 super carry. We set out to make whatever the most effective personal defense auto pistol cartridge could be, knowing, balancing out how many rounds in the gun, how big to make the gun, the what is, how do we maximize the terminal potential with the amount of energy that we have to work with. And we kept coming back to that 312 diameter bullet just worked really well for the right balance.
Yeah,
So
everything is a compromise. So find the balance that works. And, if the answer is 32, well, then the answer is 32.
that's right.
You
That's
know, in
right.
some,
That's how we,
some applications, it's not 32, but, for the
right.
ones is, you have to recognize, well, this is the answer. Okay, I can go with
Yeah.
that.
How deep a penetration would you typically expect of, say, a 32 of yesteryear versus the ammo that you're producing today? Are we noticing a big difference in that ballistic potential?
Well, I mean, your penetration depths of wad cutters and semi wad cutters and things like that is already pretty good, right? What we're achieving now today is we're getting expansion and then getting to those same penetration depths. So the penetration of those traditional bullets was typically pretty good, but you had an increased risk of over penetration, so more energy exiting the other side than you'd like it to have, or not fully utilizing all the energy that the cartridge has available, because you're just poking that hole through and you're leaving something on the table that you could get to do something else with, right? So that's why in today what we're trying to do is find that right balance. And the 32 H&R and 327 are a good example, and why when we do a modern bullet for them, we do a 327 Magnum in HST. That bullet gets big fast. It's really lends itself well to something that's got more available energy to work with. So
Right.
we
And
can
what
get it
grain
big
weight
and
bullet
get
is that
penetration.
HST?
Yeah.
Is it 104?
104.
Yeah. Yeah. The
If I
energy.
remember correctly, yeah. It's and that's weird too. I get asked why 104, and it's we when we design bullets, yeah, it's exactly right. So we iterate, we ideate. What do we think is going to work best? We make a bunch of samples and we put them
Right.
through the ringer through testing. You down select, you reiterate,
Right.
test, down select, and whatever the grain weight is, is whatever it is for the best bullet. Whatever is the best bullet, it weighs what it weighs, right? So we're not trying to achieve a particular grain weight. And when I say it's the best bullet, we use terminal performance criteria
Right.
as the determining factor. So when an engineer is going to start working on a bullet, I tell him what I want for weight retention, expansion, penetration. I tell him what barriers I want it to work in, what guns it needs to work in, and
Hmm.
that just gives him the parameters, and then that sets them off to what's the best bullet,
Right.
right?
Rather
So
than designing the best bullet, however that would be defined, and then trying to construct a cartridge pistol design around that. We have existing pistols, we have existing cartridges. So the bullet is what gets all the work to be designed to come to the 104 grains in this case. Now,
yes,
and
yeah,
it would be the 104 and one in the 327 to get the same performance out of the 32 would be a different weight because it doesn't have as much energy to be
right.
used in expansion and in penetration. You've got a limited number there. It's like a household budget, so to speak.
That's exactly right, and that's why we didn't do an HST in 32 H&R,
Right.
because in order to maximize the potential of the energy available in that cartridge,
Hmm.
we decided to go with a Hyra-Shok Deep. So the Hyra-Shok Deep bullet, we control how big it's going to get. Now it
Hmm.
gets big fast, but it's maximized at that size, and it reserves more energy for penetration depth. Because
Right.
that bigger the bullet gets, the faster it gets big. Then you've got all that extra surface area, and all that energy is
Yep.
used. So it can limit your penetration depths. That's why, like, the 327 is a shallower penetrator than the 32 H&R out of those two bullets, right? But the
Yeah.
HST gets big.
Right.
Right. So you're starting with a 312 diameter and ending up with something 70.
Wow.
so
Yeah.
No kidding.
Yeah.
so it gets big, and that's still penetrating 12 inches plus 12, 13 inches.
Now, when
Right.
you can
So
get when you can get a bullet that can expand to the diameter of a manhole cover, let me know because I want to get a Connex container of those. Yeah.
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 Yeah, I should see what an upset looks
Well,
like for our 50 AE Fusion.
Oh,
It's
geez.
like 1.2 inches. It's a
Oh my.
no
monster when it's
kidding.
fully expanded. Yeah. Yeah, they're ferocious. So, but
So you mentioned about you developed them also for the guns, and of course, the lead photo of Patrick's article features a Ruger SP101, and it was originally chambered in 32 H&R Magnum, as illustrated on the barrel, but
yeah,
then it's also been laser engraved over it 327.
yeah.
That evidently, I've been told, was the developmental prototype revolver for that cartridge. Can you tell us a little bit about that story? And
Yeah,
Patrick, how does the 327 Federal, compare out of Ruger SP101?
yeah, that was, I mean, that was the initial revolver. That was what we had for the longest time, was just that SP101. Now, we worked with other gun manufacturers at the time too. They were the ones who Ruger grabbed onto it at that time, right? And it's nice to see that when you find the right combination where they get the idea, right, and what you want to do with it. Now the 327 was a little more, let's utilize Magnum, right? So it uh, a little bit more revolver size, right? Over something like, and I now you got the LCRs and things, and people, I actually like that in 327 too, but it's a handful. But going to a little bit more size, getting that extra round in the cylinder, right? So you can go to that kind of J frame size gun and get the extra round and get that extra potential performance out of the cartridge, and make it backwards compatible with all these other things, which is nice too. So you can shoot 32 Smith and Wesson in it. You can shoot 32 H&R. So for that person who it's doesn't always need a 327, you had all that other compatibility. It was just a nice it's a nice way to introduce a new caliber like that, right? So you're not pigeonholed into the all or nothing all the time with this big monster cartridge. Because I don't know how much, I know, Patrick, you shot the 327 a bunch. It's especially the HST. It's, I mean, it's a Magnum, right? It's as noticeable as going from a 38 special standard pressure to a 357.
Oh yeah, you're in for a ride when you use that, because you can't exceed 9 millimeter parabellum ballistics in a revolver without paying the price. There's going to be muzzle blast. There's going to be recoil. It's like that's the price of entry. You want to ride the ride, pay for the ticket. Yeah. And that's why the 32 would be the backup gun, in an ankle holster or something like that. You know, if I'm starting out in a fracas, I want everybody to know just what's going on here. That this is not a nice place to be. You want to leave. Yeah.
So I've got some shooting. I actually reviewed a Ruger LCR in 327 Federal when it came out years ago, and I remember it was a stout, had a little bit of a flamethrower effect. In
Mhm.
fact, photographer took some awesome night photos, but it makes it look like a flamethrower worse than it actually is because it's over in an instant. But some great photos came out of that we never published. But uh, you know, you mentioned the 32 Smith and Wesson in there. What does something like a 32 Smith and Wesson feel like in a gun like that? Just for that.
It's like a rimfire. It's
Yeah.
blinking. When I started gunsmithing, the shop had been and going concern for more than 20 years at that point. And every time somebody sold something to the shop, it would come in with, loose ammo or partial box or whatever. And there were 3 or 4 coffee cans of 32 revolver cartridges on the shelf that had come in with revolvers and had never been used. And from time to time, just out of curiosity, I would go plink with some of that. And it was like, yeah, 32 S&W is like a 22 long rifle, pretty much. It's a plinking cartridge. Um,
Hmm.
and if you wanted to use it in an SP101, if it wasn't for the noise of it going bang, you might not know that it actually fired.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. It's, and that's part of why I love that gun so much, because you've got all those options. You want to introduce a new shooter,
right.
something
Yeah.
like that. You can put in something like that, but we make everything up to, I mean, we make a Swift A-frame hunting load that we did because of the popularity of lever guns. Same thing with hammer
Mhm.
down, right? The
Right.
Henrys, they were seeing a lot of sales of the 327 in their lever guns. So
Interesting.
the caliber kind of lends itself to more stuff. So the beauty of those revolver cartridges like that is you can just
Yeah.
do so much. So
Yeah.
now that the 32 H&R, I would agree with you, Patrick, on the carrying the 327 is the primary until we did the Hyra-Shok Deep.
Yeah.
And now I see what terminally we can do with 32 H&R with a modern bullet design.
Okay.
And it has really, I would feel very comfortable carrying that ultimate carry revolver
Hmm.
in
Huh.
32 H&R, because we're not getting those same upset sizes. We're seeing more things,
Right.
in the 4.8 range, but that's not unusual even for some 9 millimeter
Right.
lightweight bullets, right? That kind of right around that 5. But we're seeing that along with 13 to 14 inches of penetration depth out of that little easy to shoot
Yeah.
32 H&R revolver.
Yeah.
And that's, I carry often I carry a 38 special J frame, and I am going to be converting that as that carry gun over to 32 H&R now, after
Wow.
seeing what the engineers were able to accomplish with that modern bullet design. That it's the funniest description I saw was somebody talking about the Hyra-Shok Deep, and they get that we limit that expansion size with
Right.
how the jacket.
Right.
They're like, you get basically a wad cutter with a bunch of little Ginsu knives just hanging off the side.
Yeah.
And it's, but if you can accomplish that with the energy that's available there, have the faster follow-up shots and more control. And if I'm protecting someone else and I'm engaging with one hand or just things like that, the
Right.
Yeah.
ability to control it a little easier. And it turned out so good. So good. I wouldn't be opposed to having like an LCR or something like that in 327 for when I wanted the extra Magnum,
Right.
and
Yep.
then carrying that 32 H&R in it otherwise. But yeah,
Well,
it's nice to have options.
I love
we
that.
need
The
to explain
knives
something.
sounds like a independent film, martial arts film. Yeah. Flying Ginsu knives.
So you mentioned the Ultimate Carry Revolver, and for those who aren't familiar with it, that's a new revolver introduced by Smith and Wesson, and Patrick, you actually tested the model 432,
Mm-hmm.
32 H&R Magnum. It's got an MSRP currently of $759 on the Smith and Wesson website. A very short, stubby barrel. There's a definition of this is it.
Yeah.
What kind of performance do you expect out of a revolver like this versus something with the longer barrel and the heavier weight like the Ruger SP101?
Well, as far as accuracy is concerned, that stubby barrel is plenty long enough to spin up a bullet and give it the stability it needs. I think I remarked or mentioned in the article that um, I was doing G&A TV some time ago with a 1 5/8 or whatever the length is,
Right.
Smith & Metal Model 15, and I remarked, yeah, I could hit that silhouette out there. It's 100
Yeah.
yards away. It was like before we knew it, they were setting up the cameras and getting ready to go. So
Yeah.
on camera, first take, 6 hits out of 6 shots.
I mean,
So
you are an exceptional revolver shooter, though. We even had a reader write in this month asking, "Hey, was that a misprint in your spec chart? Are you really able to shoot, these 1.5 inch groups at 25 yards?" But
or do we have like a Spinal Tap scale thing here going with
Yeah.
like the NEF
yeah, I think Patrick
Stonehenge? Right?
ransom rest. So
well, the thing is, not to brag, but you put 1.5 million rounds down range. If you're paying attention at all,
Yeah.
things are going to start to come together after a while. And back in the old days of IPSC, we used to joke that you spent the first 100,000 rounds learning how to shoot, and the second 100,000 undoing the mistakes you learned on the first.
Yeah. Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
funny.
So,
Well,
And it's as far as barrel length goes too, it's additional sight radius will help the average shooter with,
Yeah.
with accuracy, right?
Yeah.
But as far as the capability of the cartridge, we design them for the different barrel lengths, right? So
right.
the 32 H&R Hyra-Shok Deep we designed for that ultimate carry revolver. So that
Right.
was Lipsy's basically saying, look, we know you guys can do something better than what's out there for 32 H&R. Why don't you give it a shot and let us know? And here's the gun that we want it to be for.
Yeah.
And so we developed it with that around that gun. Now you do see some benefit in the longer barrel. In Hyra-Shok Deep, it's less noticeable. So Hyra-Shok Deep cares less about barrel length
because it's limited in its expansion. Yes, right. Okay,
yes.
it's the wall.
So it gets as big as it's going to get right away, and
Right.
and the additional velocity that you get out of the more additional barrel length will get you another 3/4 of an inch of penetration depth, but
Okay.
everything else is going to be almost equal. So,
And a brief aside about accuracy of shooting for those who are going to be watching this or paying attention. Most people don't have as good eyesight as they think they do. I spent my entire life wearing corrective lenses, and then I had to get eye surgery and got basically new eyes. And my eyes are, the right is just under 20/20 and the left is just under 20/15 in vision. And when you can see things clearly, you can shoot better. And most people walk around with 20/25, 20/30 vision, and they think, yep, I'm as good as everybody else. And it's that small difference that brings you from that's a bragging group to that's an okay group.
yeah.
right.
They should get their eyes checked, basically.
In revolver too, there's a lot of that,
Yes.
especially those double action
yeah.
only, right? So
Yeah, the
Well,
follow through
let me
important. Yeah.
let me that's a great transition here because I'm looking at your best groups right now, Patrick. And for the Ruger SP101, the longer barrel, it's also a double action or single action
Right.
revolver. You had groups, your best group actually was American Eagle ammunition, 85 grain jacketed soft point. You've got a 1.7 inch group at 25 yards. And even with the Hyra-Shok Deep, you've got a 1.9 inch group at 25
It's a
yards.
low coffee day. Yes.
Yeah. With the Smith & Wesson Model 432, the ultimate carry revolver, shorter barrel, of course, shorter sight radius. It's also a double action only. Is that
Right.
double action trigger part of the reason we saw your best groups hover more in the upper 2s and low 3 inch groups?
Yeah, in double action, it's more difficult to control over travel and follow through. We found that out back in the old days shooting PPC, is that everybody built a trigger stop into the revolver so they could control the over travel and get the best grouping in their hands that way. So, the amount you have to have a certain amount of over travel because you have to have the parts have clearance as the hammer falls. But since you've spent all that time pulling back on the trigger, that last part after the hammer starts to fall becomes the most important part. And on a little lightweight gun like that, it's just not as easy as it is on the heavier Ruger. And if the Smith had been an all steel revolver, it would have been less pleasant to carry, but easier to shoot because the weight dampens that over travel problem.
I find it too with the little lightweight guns with the lightweight cylinders, because you're trying to spin up mass,
Right.
Yeah.
right? If your trigger pull is actually getting that cylinder to move, and it feels like with the bigger revolvers, it's once you start getting it moving, it's easier to keep that smooth trigger pull. But in the little lighter guns, I find it harder to keep it that smooth press through the whole,
Yeah,
because of that.
it's
It's so much resistance through the whole
yeah.
thing. So
And back in the very early days of IPSC, I spent a lot of time shooting revolvers, especially at the local PPC league. And I learned how to stage the trigger. So to pull the trigger back enough in double action to bring the cylinder up and then lock it before then following through on the last part. So for accuracy shooting, that's very useful. For high speed IPSC, IDPA, something like that, doesn't really matter. You're just going to press right through all the way anyway. But when it comes to shooting groups, it's a useful skill to have developed.
We are seeing a lot of interest now, both in the 32 H&R and the 327 Federal.
Hmm.
I like to think we had something to do with their revival, but I got to give credit to Lipsy's for having Smith Wesson make that ultimate carry revolver as well.
Definitely.
Uh, but do you see this as a lasting interest? Will the 32 be reliably found on retail counters?
I think so, yes. If for no other reason, there's always going to be revolvers as carry guns. And with the 32 and the 327, you're getting 6 shots in the space that a 5-shot revolver, 38 special, would have. And if the bullet design is going to more or less equalize the performance of those two projectiles, I want 6 instead of 5.
Hmm.
I think a lot of people are going to come to the same conclusion.
So,
yeah.
with the familiarity people have with the 38, 357
Hmm.
chamberings revolvers, uh, where will the 32s end up landing? Will they ever rise up to that popularity? What would have to happen for them to get that level of respect?
I think it'd take another generation of shooters. There's too many older shooters. I'm really old, but there's a generation behind me still that view 32s as meh cartridges. But once you get younger than that, they're coming to it fresh. They don't have those decades of indoctrination of 38 special is the bottom limit. And so they're going to look at things and assess, and just as you did, Christopher, go, yeah, 104 grains, sure, I'm on board. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. That I think too, as there's a lot of the younger generation is learning fresh, so there's a lot of additional education that comes with it, or just even if you don't understand the why behind um, the benefit of the 32 H&R. So 38 special was a black powder cartridge,
Mhm.
right? So people fail to realize how much difference powder shift with smokeless powder
Mm,
means to the performance of a 38 special, right? And we have to factor that into development, because you do this come down and shoot versus this come down up and shoot, there can be 100 foot per second difference
mm.
just related to the positioning of the powder. So we have to design the bullet to work for that. So we have to design a worst case, okay, powder forward in a 1 7/8 inch barrel with a 38. So you've got those factors, right? The 32 has got much less of that to factor in.
Mhm.
So you just get a better, more consistent cartridge out of the more modern cartridge, because it's designed for today's smokeless powders, right? So
a win for the 327.
Yep. The other thing too, talking about barrel lengths in 327, I wanted to mention was you do see more difference in performance in the barrel lengths of the 327, because with the HST, because of how big it can get, you do see a difference. And we do test for both. The main thing you're going to see is in the shorter barrel, you're going to have obviously a little less expansion and kind of a similar penetration depth. So the difference in penetration depth between the two barrel lengths is going to be less. Your expansion size is going to be much different. You will see more difference between just bare gel or tissue and heavy clothing and barriers in tissue in a shorter barrel, because it's going to be more sensitive to those things at the lower velocity. The more velocity you push, you get a little bit forgiveness for that. So what you'll see is a little more upset size and a little more consistency as you go through different barriers. So that's the benefit of going to that longer barrel length. But again, we design for both.
Right.
We factor for both. So
with the popularity of pistol caliber carbines coming up, of course, lever actions, do you see potential growth? Could we ever imagine a Smith & Wesson model 1854, for example, in something like one of these 32s? Patrick, do you have any insight there? I certainly don't.
Well, again, going back more than a century, the third most common chambering in the Colt single action army was 3220. Cowboys
Yes.
3220 was up to the task. Well, the 327 is a 3220 on steroids, and I could see that in a lever gun being something I'd be very interested in.
It's so fun to shoot. So
Yeah.
fun to shoot in a lever gun.
Yeah.
Yeah, that all of that bark that you get out of shooting the handgun, it's easily ignored.
Okay.
when you're shooting a lever gun, it's you take that carbine barrel and lever guns are just fun to shoot
They're
anyway.
fun anyway. Yeah, really.
Yeah. So
Yes.
it's probably one of my favorite guns to just shoot for fun is a 45 Colt lever gun, just because it's so enjoyable. It hits the steel hard because you got the mass, but it's so light recoiling. And so in 327, it's really a pleasure too. And of course, there you can go down if you want to, right? So you can go down to an H&R in some of those designs, and
some of the designs would be more sensitive to the shorter cartridge than others. But
it's the feed, right? It's about having all that, how the action works and things like that.
Right.
Yeah.
I would love to see what it's like suppressed in one of those. Arlen or
we're really getting out there. Suppressed lever gun in 327 Magnum. That's okay, right? What's the barrel? How heavy a bullet can we put in there? And
do the trade-off for the barrel weight. Now, there is certainly going to be. We have found grain weight limitations to the twist rate in the current guns in market, right? So that there's certainly that, but and we noticed a lot more of that when we developed 30 Super Carry.
Yeah.
So that they can be sensitive. The 327, the 312 diameter bullets can be pretty sensitive to grain weight range. And that's why you saw our the heavier gold dot that we used to make go away. Was related to that. Just the different guns that they had, it became more sensitive to things like that. So,
so are we seeing basically the max output from Federal in terms of what you're going to develop for the 32s, the 332 H&R Magnum and 327 Federal? Does there have to be more popularity and interest from the consumer side for you guys to continue or further developing bullet profiles and bullet weights for this?
No, I think we're open to it if we get enough feedback for different needs where we could do more specialized types of approach to development. We did introduce that 32 H&R American Eagle. It's just the same projectile 85 grainer that we put in the in the 327, but that was to give people something that they could practice with
Right.
and shoot more recreationally with. That would be
Sure.
a little lower cost. That there is more that we could potentially do, but it would have to be specialized, right? Like we did the 327 in Hammer Down,
Right.
because that we had a specific application. So I'd say we are certainly open to it, and there are babies, right?
Right.
And the demand for the 312s in the plant is higher than it's ever been. Right.
Okay.
So we have a loader that is running year round now, just making 32 H&R, 327 Federal, and 30 Super Carry.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
That's all. That loader is booked for the year doing that.
Wow.
And every time we overbuild 32 H&R, like, well, that we sold out of that quick. Let's overrun it a couple 100,000 rounds, put it in the warehouse, and it's gone in an hour.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Right? So we still have found kind of where the ceiling is
Right.
on the popularity of that cartridge.
Good
So
problem to
I
have.
say,
Yeah.
yeah, and it's I mean, it's not something we're going to put on like the really high output loaders that we would use for other higher run cartridges yet, right? But the fact
Right.
that we've got a loader that we can just keep cranking, that loader used to be shared with other calibers, and now that loader is just cranking the 312s year round,
Wow.
which I love, right?
Yeah.
There are babies, and I really think that they're great calibers. Again, I'm biased because I work here, but at the same time, as far as carrying, my life is more important to me than the devotion I have to the brand.
Right.
Right. So if there was a better option for personal defense, I would go to it.
Right.
If somebody else made it
Wow.
or designed something else. So when I say I'm going to carry a 32 H&R, and we test everybody's. We
Yeah.
test
Right.
everybody's
Oh, yeah.
ammunition, all the different guns. We test all of it. If there was something I thought was better, I'd go to it without hesitation. But I would have no hesitation carrying the 32 H&R and a Hyra-Shok Deep.
Yep.
I would have almost no hesitation to 327, but I don't know that I'd regularly carry the 327 in an LCR, but I would in the 101. Right?
Yes.
But I'm a little unusual too in that I don't mind carrying a little bit more revolver, because
Sure.
I like revolver.
Yeah.
I like the reliability of it, the predictability of it. If I was with family, I know they can operate it. If for some reason I was out of commission and they could take my firearm and operate it, it's just, there's a reliability to revolver, right?
Yeah.
So,
And if I had my wishes, I'd whisper into Smith and Wesson's ear to resurrect their Model 16, the one they did in 32 H&R. It's a K-frame, but make it a 7-shot in 327.
Oh,
That would be, something nice to carry.
with a 3-inch barrel, something like that.
They made them 4 and 6, but I would go 3. I would go 4.
Yeah.
It's like I'd be happy with whatever they made. Yeah.
I'm kind of I think 3 would be kind of that perfect balance, right, for something
Sort of
like
like
that.
the FBI Model 13s. Yeah.
Yeah.
that's right.
Yeah.
Well, Patrick,
Kind
I
of
got to
do-
ask,
yeah.
try not to get married to anything. We still need you to review other platforms. Thank you for your input, Chris. Thank you for joining us today as well to talk about
for
the
sure.
32 H&R Magnum versus the 327 Federal. That was a lot of fun. And be sure to pick up September issue of Guns and Ammo magazine to see Patrick Sweeney's full review and More Than Retro.